This is a public service announcement for every single parent out there. You say you want the best for your family? Well, this is it, the humble minivan. So it's time for you to get over whatever hangups you might have and check out some of the awesome options out there, including this overhauled Toyota Sienna that just might surprise you. I'm going to start this week by saying this. I get it, not many of you out there think vans are cool. And I hate to break it to you, but as soon as you start putting your kids' names on all their stuff and dressing them in matching clothes, you're not much of an authority on what's cool anyway. And if I haven't lost you yet, let me put it like this. This is way more practical than any SUV out there. And since so many parents seem to be obsessed with things that make sense, balanced diets, not too much screen time, and the importance of a good night's sleep, you should all be clamoring for these things. But just in case you're not, Toyota has decided to sweeten the pot with this new Sienna. Here's the other thing, any of you out there that say you prefer SUVs for their inherent safety benefits, well, you can get all-wheel drive in the Sienna, not to mention all kinds of advanced safety features, but we'll get into those a little bit later. And this isn't the first time you've been able to get all-wheel drive in a Sienna, but what is new in this 4th gen version is what's under the hood. There's a hybrid powertrain. This is the first time you've ever been able to get a hybrid in this van, and it's the only powertrain available. Now, this isn't the only hybrid minivan on the market either. Don't forget about the plug-in version of the Chrysler Pacifica. But what makes this Sienna unique is the combination of hybrid power and that available all-wheel drive. This is the only model on the market that you can get both. Now, this is the same powertrain you can get in the Toyota Highlander hybrid, so if you're absolutely convinced that you must have an SUV, you can go ahead and watch my review of that thing once you're done here, and it is a pretty good vehicle overall. I like that thing a lot, but I implore you to keep this one on your shopping list because it's pretty amazing. And no matter whether you're talking about the front-wheel drive version or this all-wheel drive one I'm driving, what's under the hood is the same. You get a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder gas engine that makes 189 horsepower and 176 pound-feet of torque on its own. And that's paired with dual electric motor generators, one that puts power to the wheels and another one that puts energy in the battery pack that's under these front seats. And that is something that's unique about this Sienna compared to the Highlander or the RAV4 hybrid, because in both of those sport utilities, the battery pack is under the back seats. Here, it's under these front seats, and you do feel like you're a little bit higher, and there is a little bit less headroom up here than there was in the last version of the Sienna. But looking at it from a glass half full perspective, that means you have that natural higher seating position that a lot of people say they prefer about SUVs. And I'm not uncomfortable in here anyways, considering I'm 6'3". Yes, I'm pretty close to the limit, but it's not too bad. The only real letdown here is the transmission, but that's because it's the continuously variable type, so it gets very buzzy once you get on the gas. But the trade-off is this thing is incredibly efficient. Now, back when I tested the Highlander hybrid, it was summertime and the conditions were perfect. And let's just say it is nothing close to that nice out here. It's like -16 with the wind chill, and we've had plenty of snow this week. But I'm not doing much worse than I did when I tested that Highlander. And when I went on my initial test loop when I picked this thing up, I averaged the same 6.4 liters per 100 kilometers I did in that thing. And it was very cold and windy, though there wasn't much snow, and that was over 230 kilometers. I am very impressed with how this thing has been performing this week. As far as the drive goes, I don't really think it's fair to call this lethargic, but there's definitely a sedated quality to it. And part of that is because it really encourages efficient driving. It works really hard to keep you out of the gas engine, especially when you have the drive mode set to eco. But of course, that is the reason to buy one of these things. And you don't have to try too hard to drive it efficiently. It's just that you do have to be wary, especially when you're pulling out onto a country road like this. You want to make sure you're not cutting in front of traffic coming up behind you, or when you're merging onto the highway. You do have to be a little bit more conscious of your driving if you want to drive this as efficiently as possible. But again, it's not hard. It just takes a little bit more practice to get it right. The other thing is steering response is incredible. I was really surprised at how quickly this thing can change direction, and it feels like a much smaller vehicle. Don't get me wrong, there isn't much feel, but I just really like that it feels so planted, but also a little bit agile and nimble. It's not the minivan you remember. There is a little bit of body roll here, but it's no worse than your average 3-row SUV, and I'd say it feels just a little bit more planted because it's got a lower center of gravity. And then the other thing to remember is that you can get it with all-wheel drive like the one I'm driving, and it's an on-demand system like the ones you can get in so many SUVs out there. And that means it starts in rear-wheel drive when you're accelerating from a stop, but then it switches over to a front-wheel drive format to cut down on consumption. But it is very quick to respond if it detects any spinning wheels up front, and it can send up to 80% of the available torque to the back wheels. And the other thing I like about it, it's a fully automatic system. There are no settings for you to worry about, just let it do its thing. Some of these roads out here, well, they haven't been plowed all that well, but there's been no issues out here at all. I am very impressed with how composed this is. And then the other thing about the way it drives is the ride quality, and I am very impressed with that too. Over some really broken pavement, you can feel the rigidity of the platform, but the suspension does a really nice job of soaking up most bumps before they reach the cabin. And I have noticed some wind noise this week, but it hasn't been too bad on anything but the blusteriest days, and it does keep you pretty well insulated from the rest of the world. Okay, before we do a quick walk around, I do want to point out one problem with having the battery pack under these front seats. I know I just went on about the fact that I had enough headroom in the driver's seat, but that's because it's height adjustable. This one isn't, and headroom is terrible because of it. I feel like I'm sitting on a phone book up here. If you're shorter than me, you're not going to have a problem, but if you're my height or taller, you're not going to be happy riding shotgun. Now let's talk a little bit about styling. I know that's a contentious issue for a lot of people, and they don't think minivans are stylish, but I think Toyota's designers nailed this one. Another way to look at it is I don't think Toyota is going to sell any less Siennas because this thing stands out. Though here's something that stands out for the wrong reasons on this top trim. Just take a look at these wheels. Good from afar, but far from good because those are plastic covers over genuine alloys. I don't get it. Cheap, disingenuous, and terrible. But we're talking about things families are going to appreciate, and accessibility is a big one. Not just because of those sliding doors either, just take a look at this liftover height. It's nice and low to the ground. It's only about 2 feet off the ground, which is about 6 to 10 inches shorter than your average SUV. And that means you're not gonna put your back out when you're hucking luggage into the trunk before that family road trip you're planning on taking. And then that brings us to those sliding doors. First and foremost, they're gonna keep the kids from dinging the cars parked next to you when you finally get to that hotel. The other thing is, every trim but the base one, well, they get kick sensors so that you can open the sliding doors as well as the trunk. And then if you take a look inside, every trim that has captain's chairs gets super long slide second row seats so the kids can get limo-like legroom without taking up all the cargo capacity. That is very family friendly stuff, and there's no SUV out there you can get a feature like this. If you decide to keep those third row seats upright, you get about 950 liters of space in the back, which is about twice as much as you get in a 3-row SUV like the Highlander or the Ford Explorer, and that is very impressive. But the other impressive thing is just how easy it is to stow those seats. My boss and co-host extraordinaire, Jody Lai, was very impressed with how easy it was to do it with one hand. You can fold down either side without much hassle at all. It's a lot different than the minivans that I grew up with that you had to pull the seats right out. The other cool thing is if you have those seats upright, you get that deep well in the floor, which is a great way to keep your bags upright. There's nothing worse than going for groceries and having all your stuff spill out when you go around a corner. I really like that. But then if you do have those seats folded, there is a ton of room, and it doesn't matter where you have those long slide seats. The only way you're going to get that much room in an SUV is if you go with a big 3-row like the Chevy Tahoe or the Ford Expedition, which is way pricier and way less practical. It also feels like the interior design team was in a competition with itself to see how many nooks and crannies it can convert into usable storage. And trust me when I say this, no SUV, no matter the size, has as many cubbies, trays, and slots for your stuff as this Sienna. It is incredible. Just take this dashboard. Why have it just roll down into the glove compartment when you can put a shelf there for your stuff? And then you have this massive cubby underneath the console, a bunch of storage up here. Even these door panels have different shelves. I love it. It is so versatile and so usable, and that to me is what stands out the most about this cabin. And again, there's about the same amount of passenger space as you get in a big 3-row SUV like the Expedition, but this one just feels a lot more usable, and it's not just because of how easily accessible it all is. It's the way the space comes together in such a cohesive manner. The other big benefit something like this has over a big body-on-frame SUV is just how user-friendly it is to drive. Yes, it's big, but it doesn't necessarily feel that way. And the other cool thing is this nose is so stubby that it is very easy to maneuver in parking lots. You're not looking over this massive hood, it is right there. You don't have to be sitting up too high either. You can see exactly where you are. And the other cool thing is there aren't many blind spots. I really like the way the designers have put this together. These A-pillars are very narrow, and then you have this quarter glass so you can see around these big door mirrors. No blind spots to worry about, and these are the pesky ones that can hide pedestrians in crosswalks. So this is very thoughtfully done. I'm not so crazy about the size of the blind spot you have behind the C-pillar, which is just behind those sliding doors. And a big part of the problem is the headrests in the second and third rows. They do create some blind spots, but they're not too bad, and these door mirrors make up for them. And then, of course, you do get standard blind spot monitoring, and that brings me to all the advanced safety stuff you get. Every version of the Sienna comes with blind spot monitoring, automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, lane departure warning, lane keep assist. There's even adaptive cruise control that works in stop and go traffic. The only thing is, I'm not so crazy about Toyota's lane centering function. It fights really hard to do what it wants, but for the most part, it's not too bad. And it is nice to have, especially because you get that in the cheapest version of this van. Some other good stuff comes standard too. You get this big and responsive touchscreen, 7 USB ports throughout the cabin, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, sunshades in the rear doors, a heated steering wheel, and heated front seats. But I do have one complaint. If you want ventilated front seats or heated rear seats, you have to shell out 58 grand before tax for the top trim, or 60 grand for the top trim with all-wheel drive. And you know, the Highlander Hybrid is the same way. You can only get those features in the most expensive one, and that's 58 grand as well. But that comes with all-wheel drive. So if you want your Sienna the same way, it's gonna cost you a couple grand more. And that top trim also gets you a bunch of extra stuff like real leather upholstery and this rear seat entertainment system. But that brings me to my other issue. No Wi-Fi hotspot in Canada like you can get in the US. That puts this thing at a disadvantage compared to that Pacifica or the Honda Odyssey. If you're okay missing out on those features, you can get into a base version of the Sienna for about $42,000 before tax, and then it's going to cost you 2 grand more to get all-wheel drive, and that's the way it goes throughout the lineup. There are stops at $45,000, $48,000, and $53,000, and then it's going to cost you $2,000 more to add all-wheel drive. And if you can't justify shelling out $58,000 or $60,000 for the top-of-the-line trim, I think the sweet spot might be the XSE trim with the Tech Pack, because you get stuff like that rear seat entertainment system, this digital rear view mirror, and a 12-speaker stereo for about $5,000 less than this one. To recap, I like how this new Sienna sips gas like a small car, that it's a hybrid and can be ordered with all-wheel drive, and that most trims come with those business class back seats. I don't like that you can't get it with a Wi-Fi hotspot, that ventilated front seats and heated rear seats only come in the top trim, or how buzzy the powertrain is when the gas engine kicks in. I'll be honest, I think the only thing that bums me out about this new Sienna is that you can't get it with a Wi-Fi hotspot. Yes, there is that cool way that you can cast straight from your phone to the rear seat entertainment system, but I'd call that a pretty crucial feature for a family hauler that's missing from the options list. But otherwise, it's pretty much damn near perfect in every way. It's so spacious and versatile, and it burns less gas than a Corolla, even with all-wheel drive like this one. If you're watching this because you're genuinely interested in what this thing has to offer, then congratulations. You're definitely not going to be disappointed by what it has to offer. For those of you still on the fence, well, you're only doing you and your family a disservice by keeping it off your shopping list.